One. Boom! Woo. Hello everyone, welcome, what's up? I'm your host Alan Socken, welcome to Simulation. Today we're sitting down with Matt McKibbin.
How's it going, Alan?
What's up, man?
Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, of course.
Between all your DC and Dubai's and all this stuff, you're finally able to sit down with us.
Yeah, I gave away most of my things here in the past couple months and living the decentralized nomadic lifestyle. But I've been in San Francisco for about a week and a half, and so it's perfect timing to sit down here.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love. We're gonna show that little Tulum graphic, the one on your banner on your Facebook.
Yeah,
that one. I was just sent that like last week as well by somebody, and I thought it was perfect. So we will show that to you guys. I think you will really enjoy it. So Matt's background is great, and I actually have never heard of this before, but industrial hygiene at West Virginia University.
Industrial hygiene engineering, yeah.
So interesting.
So I mean, like undergrad was in physics. I picked physics. I actually got into West Virginia University out of state, and it was cheaper to go there than Penn State in-state at the time. I was from Altoona, Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania, where the Slinky was invented. Cheaper. I got a small scholarship and ended up going for physics. I liked math and science, and one of my uncles was a physicist, so it just felt right. Really hard major, actually, when you figure it out.
Oh, yeah.
And wanted to switch to engineering a couple times. My parents were like, no, just finish the degree. You can do whatever you want afterwards. And then 2008, everything crashed. That's exactly when I graduated. And decided to go straight to grad school. I liked health and safety. I did like protecting people, and this was kind of like the analytical side of all the health and safety engineering concepts that I liked.
So tell us a bit about this, like what is industrial hygiene? Like, you were talking about protecting people. Mm-hmm. Was it literally, what were some of these classes like? What were you learning? I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, so in industrial hygiene, you kind of think of, like, in my mind, I kind of think of like a giant toothbrush, and you're cleaning like big industrial things. When in reality, industrial hygiene is the anticipation, recognition, and prevention of hazards within the workplace.
So like OSHA?
OSHA is the regulatory body that makes the laws around health and safety in the workplace. NIOSH would be one of the research arms, and there's a lot of different environmental and standards that get put out because it's really hard for, especially people that are just doing their jobs, to know exactly how much they're being exposed to. So the example the example I always use is, like, if you imagine you're a welder, right? How much metal fumes are you breathing?
A lot.
How much is dangerous?
Yeah.
How do you know how much you're breathing? Yeah. And then how do we prevent metal fume fever? And know when you have it and treat it when you have it.
And black lung disease.
Pneumonic ultramicroscopic stovacaniconiosis is the the longest word in the English dictionary. Coal miner's disease. Silicosis, those types of things. Since I had a physics background, I ended up working at a nuclear facility as my first job out of grad school in Ohio. And so in Ohio, they have these nuclear enrichment facilities, Ohio and Kentucky. This is actually a really cool story, so I have to tell it.
Yeah.
They have these where they enriched all the uranium from the 1950s, 40s, 50s, and there's 20,000 20-ton cylinders of depleted uranium hexafluoride, so DUF6, sitting outside, rusting in a field. Okay, they're starting to.
I think I've seen a photo of this before.
Yeah, it's so they're out there, they're rusting, and the Ohio EPA
is
depleted. So it's not enriched uranium. This is where they put the waste, essentially.
Exactly.
But when depleted uranium hexafluoride, DUF6, reacts with moisture in the air, it produces radioactive hydrofluoric acid gas. Radioactive, so hydrofluoric acid is not just like a hydrochloric acid where you get an acid burn. HF, if you get enough to cover the palm of your hand, enough surface area, you die within 24 hours without being treated, right? You can treat it. So we were taking these 20-ton cylinders of depleted uranium, reacting it with superheated steam and hydrogen through a process, and making 10,000 gallon tanks of hydrofluoric acid to sell back to industry and get rid of this get rid of this very and
That's
then
such
put
a
the
cool
rest
project.
in that. So that was my first job. I was one of the health and safety guys there. It was an eye-opening experience at the Department of Energy nuclear site, and knew I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. Did
because
that.
safety is great, but doing it in a way like that was not of great interest.
No, it was interesting. I ran into really intelligent people that had worked in the field. A lot of Navy nukes, really hardcore intelligent people that have been in the bottoms of Navy subs with nuclear reactors, and they know all of their engineering, they know all of their nuclear physics, they know all of that, and was there. So that was a really eye-opening experience, but knew I wanted to do something else. Was getting very into what money was in society. Being in 2008, like going through that process as a new young graduate, you go, huh? What do you mean they're printing $1 trillion and giving it to banks? How does that even work? Why is that legitimate? How can we do that? And so
it's so overly complex that it becomes difficult for the average person to invest any time into learning it, especially when we're running around every single day doing the whole 9 to 5 thing. We barely have any availability to invest into learning about the system that we even live in, and a lot of that same things apply to our these magic boxes that are our phones and computers now. It's similar with even legislation with Congress. We don't know who's representing us. We barely know who's representing us in the city. We don't know what legislation's being voted on, how it's being voted on, how it's being argued upon, who's writing it. It's becoming, we need to get closer and closer to these things and not further and further away.
Yeah, we need more transparency and more ability to interact with that on a level that is not saying, well, this guy who happens to be in my local geographical area represents all of my decisions in my governance system versus, and this is something that blockchains and things can eventually help, I think, improve our governance systems, liquid democracy style, like delegating your rights, or your not rights necessarily, but you're delegating your approvals to maybe a nonprofit organization that would make decisions on nuclear safety or on environmental versus your local representative that may or may not represent you in most of your views.
This will be an interesting conversation, but the whole process of the benevolent decision tree, as in you can just throw up your vote to somebody that you think is benevolent in their decisions, and then they can throw their vote to the next one, etc., until you get to maybe one person that's representing 500 or 5,000 people with their vote. So that kind of stuff. But let's
that's going down the rabbit hole a little bit. We'll definitely talk a little bit more about like liquid democracy and delegated stuff.
So from physics to industrial hygiene.
We're dressing out in level A suits, going into the hazardous material areas, taking samples. Moved to DC.
Focus on money as well.
Focus on money. I was getting into kind of a libertarian kind of activism phase of my life. Was really interested in realizing that a lot of politicians were just lying through their teeth, and that was kind of what called. A lot of people were talking about all these different economic systems with Mises and Keynes and Hayek and Austrian versus Keynesian school, and moved to DC for a girl that didn't work out, but there was a lot of activists there, and a large nonprofit community. Was doing a radio show called Liberty Panacea on Blog Talk Radio, and talking about, our first show was called "What is Money? Where does it come from? Explain it to me like I'm 5.
Exactly.
If I go up to the average, mommy, daddy, what is money and where does it come from?
Good luck.
It comes from the government, kids. Shut up. Right. But those kind of talks. So we would try to explain it like
a shared hallucination,
a shared fiction, and what does it give value, and who are you trusting to give that value?
But it's also such a complex system that it's so difficult to explain like I'm 5, which is what we were initially talking about. Yeah.
And so that's what led me to some of these new decentralized systems, Bitcoin in particular.
Imagine explaining a blockchain ELIF 5.
Right. Well, and there's actually a famous article out there, "Explain Bitcoin to me like I'm 5."
Yeah.
And they talk about digital apples and physical apples and how you could take a digital apple and send it to someone else, but you represent digital scarcity for the first time. So for every other file that I have, if I send it to you, you know that I still have it. I can send it to whoever I want. In cryptocurrencies, it's for the first time I can send you something and you know for certain that I don't own it anymore.
Versus not being precluded from having a copy of the digital apple, which if there was an unlimited amount of digital apples, then there would be no scarcity, which means anybody could tap in anytime and get as many apples as they want.
And then it doesn't function as a great medium of exchange if we can all make as much as we want of it.
It could function as in terms of just exchange, as in you tapping in and getting the digital apple maybe printed to you to eat whenever you want, right? Something like that.
If a physical apple, right? This is more a picture of the apple kind of thing. Yeah, but yeah, if we could 3D print it.
That's pretty good. The ELI5, okay.
So and so that's really where I got into Bitcoin and decentralized systems, because I
started a meetup.
So yeah, I came in the meetup. They had started it in 2011, and I came in 2012, 2013, and there was a lot of developers. It was a small group of people, because who knew what Bitcoin was in 2012, especially in DC, and came in, and a lot of the developers wanted to develop the stuff, but they weren't exactly people that wanted to broaden and explain the concepts to hundreds of new people. And so I, being kind of a person that liked to talk to a lot of people in the development community, took over and would talk to interesting people and bring them to speak over the course of 3, 4, 5 years. And then I'm not based there anymore, but I still like to do events in DC and use the network there that we've built. So.
And then how did you manage to figure out that you wanted to start Decentranet?
Yeah.
That's been a year now?
It's been about a year that we started, maybe a little less than a year. I think it was in the middle of the summer that we kind of decided on the name and get all the website and everything up. From 2013 on, I wanted to get a job in Bitcoin and blockchain, but there weren't really many jobs. I mean, you could start your own company if you knew how to do that at the time, and I was not an entrepreneur yet. I didn't really know what I was doing there, but there were a lot of companies being formed, and I would just learning everything I possibly could, reading all of the white papers. Ethereum came out in 2014 as a white paper, invested in the token sale there. So, I sold my car for Bitcoin in the beginning of 2014 because I wasn't using it anymore.
Did everybody hear that? I sold my car for Bitcoin. I love it. We actually recently heard a story from Dan Gailey, who taught us that a very young kid went and grabbed his mom's credit card, and he sacrificed his relationship with his mother so that he could go and buy crypto off online. What a interesting story. What do you think, Ron?
He banked. Didn't he? Didn't he make a lot of money?
What year did
he stole money from his mother's credit card?
I think he did it a couple of years ago, but he.
Oh, that's good.
I think so. But yeah, and how exactly? To what extent are people willing to go to enter this field?
Yeah, I saw it as an opportunity. I wasn't using the car very much anyway. Uber was really taking off in DC, so I was. It was block 2 from the grocery store. I would use it maybe occasionally to drive home to Pennsylvania to see my parents, but I can rent a car, for the weekend if I needed to do that. So I sold it. It was a whole $10,000 or something at the time, and property taxes in Arlington. There's a 6% car property tax in Arlington. So I was like, I'm not paying this. And so and then got involved as many different types of companies, whatever I could do to help promote and talk about it. I worked for Factom, and so in 2017, D10E is another company that I helped found with Brock Pierce. Decentralized, the numeronym for Decentralized is D10E, like Andreessen Horowitz is A16Z. Yep. And so that company has taken off this year and did my last one in August of last year. the startup societies. And so I was getting all these advisory clients. People were saying, oh, can you help me with your ICO? And since we've been around since the first couple ones, we at least had the knowledge of like, oh, hey, you're doing this right, or hey, you're doing this wrong. Hey, you need to get this audited by these technical partners. And so my friends who had started their own software business a couple years ago were now doing business advisory. And I said, well, these are all the projects that I could potentially work on. And they said, we're dropping everything, let's do that.
So you had built out a pretty solid network of people that knew kind of how to launch blockchain companies or decentralized companies, and then across all of the different aspects of the actual ICO, across legal, across marketing, across all these fields, and then you were able to plug them in as they went, and so that's why you started this blockchain consultancy.
Because it's a complex process. There's some of the best lawyers, and that even changes. I mean, over the past year, at the beginning of 2017, doing an ICO, you weren't really talking to a bunch of lawyers. There might be some to make sure you weren't framing it as a security, but as long as you were kind of framing it as a token sale, pre-purchase of software, it was fine. By the end of the year, there was a new thing called a SAF, the Safe Agreement for Future Tokens, but that didn't exist at the beginning of 2017. And the marketing partners, a lot like crowdfunding in a lot of ways in terms of the way you want to do it. You wanted to preload a lot of the purchasers so that it looked like you were going to get, like you had the first couple million already in the first day, then that was a prediction that the ICOs would go.
Let's explain this for people watching. So walk us through what exactly tokens are and how many usually a company, is it analogous to a share of a company as they make whatever 10 million shares when you first make your company, and then you can distribute those as you want. Is a token analogous to that, etc.?
So a token itself is a digital, fixed, scarce digital asset that you're pretty much bootstrapping a network or an economy. I wouldn't analogize it to really a share. You don't have any voting rights necessarily, and usually tokens definitely don't give you some sort of share of a dividend or anything like that. It's more like creating a decentralized network that disintermediates middlemen in things. So let's say you had a broker service, and a massive industry, like saying the shipping industry is one of the companies that we're working on that I think is a really good example. There's a lot of different brokers, and they silo information about who the best shippers and truckers and all of are. You could create a decentralized marketplace where on a peer-to-peer basis, people can use tokens to, say, put into escrow if they don't trust that person or they have a rating, and they can then take those tokens and use them as payment. But you're not necessarily relying on central parties to hold the information. Tokens are usually part of a fixed kind of economy where, let's say you issue 1 billion tokens, you're saying that you're not going to issue any more. That's the total amount of tokens. And you issue them, say, at a certain price, let's say a penny, and you're saying that this economy is going to be about that much in value currently, and you don't necessarily know, but you're issuing that. People can purchase these tokens. A lot of times they're credits for the software to use that economy, and if they think that there's going to be more demand for these fixed amount of tokens later, the value of those tokens would relatively go up if more people wanted to use this network software system. A lot of the ones in the beginning were very much like entry credits to open source software. So you would say, okay, well, in order to use our software system, you have to purchase these credits, and the more people that you want to use our software system, the higher the value because there's a fixed amount of them.
That sounds like a pretty good way to start the token system, is once you make a scarce amount of 1 billion of them, then you can say that in order to use our service that we're providing, you must get 20 of these tokens, which is equivalent to $20 US or whatever, and then you get 20 of them, and then all of a sudden then people have become invested into the service, and they're giving it more value, and the perceived value is higher, and that's kind of how the company can fund more of their R&D, more people coming in and getting it over time.
Yep, and a lot of them were foundations, so they would say, okay, we're open source software, so we're going to set up a foundation, and then we'll build this network, this economy, and then we'll have for-profit entities or a for-profit company come in and maybe build services on top of this open source network that we're launching as well.
That's cool. So that's why then you don't get the data silos, you don't get the vertical marketplaces, you get the horizontal ones, you get the open source movement. So what you build with your white paper and what you're trying to impact the world with is all decentralized, all open source technology, and then you have an entity that comes in on top of that then tries to do something related to making some money in software or whatever, but all of the underlying guts are open source for other people to come and build entities on top of.
Wallet services, exchanges, security professionals, there's a lot of different services you can build on top of it. So, for example, Bitcoin or Ethereum, the Ethereum Foundation was what issued the original Ethereum tokens. They sold them for Bitcoin, and then they launched the network. And on top of Ethereum, you can then build decentralized applications on top. You can issue your own tokens, but there's the Ethereum network or Ethereum Foundation is a foundation, kind of like the Mozilla Foundation or the Linux Foundation, to manage the open source software of that. And then for-profit businesses can come on and build applications for consumers and for businesses.
I really like that example. I think that's a really relatable one. So, okay, so was this 2012 or 13 of Ethereum Foundation?
Ethereum white paper came out in the end of 2013, 2014, and they did their token sale in June of 2014, I believe.
Okay, so then in 2014, then Ethereum offers a scarce amount of tokens.
Yep, there was and I don't remember the exact amount, but they offered a certain amount in the token sale, a certain amount go to the founders, a certain amount go towards development and marketing and legal.
Yes.
And
that's usually what you do with your package as well, is you package it out like that as well.
We advise on how much, because you don't want the founders to get 30% of all the tokens and get instantly rich when they haven't really necessarily
proven themselves
and provided a real product. And that's what a lot of ICOs have, there have been a lot of people that have taken a large portion and they haven't necessarily delivered on a product.
Yeah, correct.
But they did that, and I don't know exactly what the exact numbers were for the Ethereum Foundation, but they did deliver, right? Within a year, Ethereum launched, I believe, their thing in 2015, and I don't remember what the exact price was. I remember when I purchased, I think one Bitcoin was $600, and you got 2,000 Ethereum per Bitcoin.
Per Bitcoin, yeah. So then you would invest the Bitcoin, get 2,000 Ethereum tokens, and then with those tokens, typically you would hold on to those tokens because there wasn't anything you could really do with them right away. Ether you weren't really using it.
Yeah, it was basically just a wallet file.
It was a wallet file, and then that you really believed into what the Ethereum Foundation had built as that guts for other people to build decentralized apps using.
Yeah.
So that was so that seems to be a pretty good way to build a decentralized platform, is to open source it. Do you think they have to go hand in hand?
Yeah, I think that the reason why we have tokens and we have these units of these things is because we can now incentivize open source software, whereas before we wanted people to use our open source software, we wanted developers to come on, but you can't necessarily, it wasn't profitable, and you couldn't necessarily incentivize people to build. So the Mozilla Foundation, they've made a lot of money, they've done donations, there's profitable businesses there. Linux the same way, but it's not the same as issuing a token and incentivizing people to come on and creating bounty programs for them to build a certain smart contract or audit something. it's now a way of incentivizing open source software and open sourcing of money, really. That's money and the internet of money.
The Internet of Money, Andreas Antonopoulos, such a good book. Initially, one of my favorite books that I read last year. Highly recommend Internet of Money. Highly recommend Book of Satoshi. Really, to get started. For me, those were great. Okay, so you were just touching on this, and I thought it was really good. As we were talking about earlier with money, it's a shared hallucination. So with tokens, it's the same thing. It's our just perceived value, whatever is there more demand for it? Okay, great, the value of it increases. So we're just perceiving a shared hallucination on if a developer wants to come on board, we can offer them a reward of some tokens to help build what we're building. And then the idea is that, now we have another developer, the developer's building out more value, so now our overall token price increases.
Yeah, I mean, it's a shared hallucination. I would say that with Bitcoin and Ethereum and the other lots of different other protocols out there, you're disintermediating a lot of the central authorities that would normally have to manage it, which are really expensive. They take a lot of management. They take a lot of middleman fees to do it. The Federal Reserve, the central banks, just the banking industry in general.
But the Bitcoin Core and Ethereum Foundation does not take a fee.
So I mean, no, they have a certain amount of Bitcoin. There are people I think that have donated to them, and with foundation, and the foundation has a certain amount of the core amount of tokens to manage the software. But it's not a business, right? It's a foundation to do that. And the value that we get from these systems is that pretty much it's a payment system, and Ethereum is also a payment system that you can write if-then statements for, smart contracts. The most basic one that I like to talk about is a vending machine. So if you put $1 into a vending machine, you put you press the 1, you get a Snickers bar. It comes out,
or a bundle of kale in San Francisco.
Right there, a bundle of kale or Snapchat glasses, right? But that's the most basic kind of understanding of what a smart contract is. If I do this, then these conditions are met, and then but you're trusting that the vending machine software will give you that. You're not looking at the code of the vending machine software. You're trusting that the company who put that there do it. With Ethereum, you're writing these contracts, these smart contracts, and then you're running it on the Ethereum virtual machine so that anyone can look at the code and say, yes, this contract, when it's executed, will do these things that we know because we can look at all the code.
And so, I was just trying to think of a reason why we need to know that Matt bought a Snickers at 3 p.m. today. Because that is one of an argument. I was hungry.
I was hungry. Right?
But this kind of concept of evolution hasn't really kept a blockchain around, and we only have humans today and all these other species, but so many species, like 90 million species have died in the past and up until now, and now we only have like 10 million or whatever. So the general idea is that we haven't kept a blockchain of evolution, but for example, why would it be important to keep a file on hand of you purchasing a Snickers at 3 o'clock? That burns electricity, that storing that data is irrelevant, or could it be relevant if a healthcare company wanted to know that you were buying a Snickers and they would be like, no, you shouldn't have eaten that 50 grams of sugar.
Right. Well, and we don't necessarily know that I bought the Snickers bar on there. It just shows a transaction, and the payment, the Ethereum network is processing that transaction.
But you would have had to use your Ether in order to buy it.
Yeah, but there doesn't necessarily, my Ether is not necessarily tied to my identity necessarily. It's pseudo-anonymous in the sense that, like with a credit card, with the credit card, your name and address and all that stuff is tied to it. And credit cards were not designed for the internet.
Yeah.
With cryptocurrencies, specifically, Bitcoin and Ethereum, you have an address, you can tie it to your name specifically, but you don't necessarily have to tie that that's your address. You can start a new one each time.
You start a new one each time.
A lot of people, if they want to protect their identity or protect what they're doing, they could say, anytime you pay me, I could start a new, I could just do a new address that's still managed by the same private keys.
So I can have a private key that has a public key that I can change for every time that I want somebody to pay that public key.
Yep, and you still have control under there, under the thing. So if you wanted to do that. So back to your question, we don't necessarily need to know, but the disintermediation of trust, of saying, well, I don't want to have to trust someone else's business software, especially if I'm doing very large processes. I don't have to trust them. I can trust the math that is the decentralized network, instead of having to trust a centralized energy to keep the books and the records for me.
Okay, so let's say you're buying the actual vending machine, because that's a larger good, and so that you care more about it than the little Snickers bar. So let's say the vending machine's whatever, $10,000, and then so now walk us through this process. What's the difference between it being centralized, owned by a company that's selling you the vending machine with an if-then statement of you pay $5,000 or $10,000, you get the vending machine? That's usually what the contract is.
I would just say that that's the vending machine software is the most simplest form to understand what a smart contract is. So the vending machine is running software that when it gets inputs, it does a couple things and it spits out an output. If I was going to be purchasing a vending machine in itself, which has that software on it, it just would go through the whatever supply chain that the vending machine company does. That's just, I always just like to use that as the simplest form of what a smart contract. Bitcoin is, I can send you this unit of account and you know that I sent it there, but I can't really attach rules to why and how and when it should be sent, other than when I send it. With Ethereum, I can say, if these conditions are met, please send to Ethereum to Alan's address.
So that's the general idea that it was not there before, is that I can now have a digital ledger that people agree on that says that I paid you for a vending machine.
Yep. And there's a proof forever that all I have to do is send you the URL of the purchase and say, yeah, I sent it to you, here's the URL. It's really easy to keep the accounting in that sense, because you're just like, did you pay me? Boom, done. And I'm not trusting that you had the right Google Excel sheet and you typed in the numbers, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it transferred.
This means so much for accounting and governance and money and exchange and so many other things. How about you walk us through? So let's go ahead and what we'll do is we'll pull up Decentranet.
Sure.
And then we'll show here kind of what you guys are, who you're working with right now, because it's a lot of. Ron, are you up on the? Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and there's a lot of companies there that are on there, and then we've signed a bunch of clients in the past couple of months that I think haven't yet been represented on there. So Decentranet, I can kind of go over specifically what we're about. We want to solve the greatest challenges using blockchain technology. So we're really interested in impact-focused technology. So energy and healthcare and financial inclusion and education, these types of blockchain projects that are really having a massive impact on someone when they're successful. One of the things that I always kind of say is there are video game tokens, for example, and they make the video game transferring value on a video game system more efficient. That's solving a problem in there. But one of our clients that I like to use, Impact PPA, which is a decentralized energy, and I'm not sure if they're specifically listed. There they are. They are kind of like the decentralized M-Pesa for energy. So they just turned the lights on in Les Ewa, Haiti. They powered some hospitals inside of in Africa, and they're building in Puerto Rico as well.
So what they do is say that we have 10 million tokens that we're offering, and that every time you fund the purchase of a token, that is funding the development of the hospital or of the electrical grid or of the educational institution.
So they are selling. They have two tokens. One is a credit, and one is a token that kind of funds the development of these energy systems. And one of the things that is really interesting. They have like a solar panel, and then they have a wind thing that also goes with it. They have a live demo where you show. You say, I want to get 1 hour's worth of power from these, and it has a battery and a smart meter on it as well. I want to get 1 hour's worth of power. I want to buy that, and I'm in they have one set up in India on top of a roof, and they go, okay, I'm gonna have enough credits to buy 1 hour's worth of power. I go with my cell phone, I click boop, and the light turns on, and they have 1 hour's worth of power. You could buy 1 week, so you can take a purchase power agreement. And put it onto an Ethereum application on your smartphone and buy whatever power that you need in a very precise way. And then they have these individual units with solar and, like I said, solar, wind, and a battery power that can go around the world. They can be hooked together. Cool. And so that's one of the cool things. So when you invest or when you purchase some of these different tokens, not only are you potentially can make some money as an impact investment, but you are also funding energy in places that has never been energy before, or hasn't been destroyed by hurricanes, and and it's been a while since they've been able to have reliable energy, and so these decentralized energy grids that are going around in the world, they are. It's amazing. It's going to be able to create these communities that have power that's separate from some sort of centralized energy grid that may or may not be great for the environment. It could be diesel. It could be really polluting. I know the Caribbean islands. There's a lot of those. So.
Yeah. Wow, that's really fascinating. I'm so grateful for the technology being leveraged for impact around the world that's immediately influential on people's lives like that, and that is incredible. Tell us more about the projects.
And so let's go over some. Loki is a really interesting one. We kind of talked. They did their ICO late last year, and they're using giving liquidity for intellectual property. So let's say you're an inventor and you're inventing something in a makerspace, and you've come up with something. You can search the history of patents in their contextual search algorithm and see what, if it has already been made and all the different components that would come to make that specific thing. And then you can register, and the idea is to have liquidity on that patent pretty quickly, because you can have the prior art immediately registered, and people can come in and purchase the tokens. The people that purchase the tokens of their system, once it's registered, that intellectual property would be kind of liquid. They're still building the system, building every day. I've talked to the team, and they're getting partnerships with a lot of universities.
Right now, I'm going to the USPTO, United States Patent and Trademark Office, and I'm doing a keyword search to try and find whether or not somebody has already made the thing that I'm looking to build. What's the difference?
Here, they have more advanced algorithms to search for the ideas on there. They've been building this system for I think since 2009, before the blockchain stuff. That the blockchain tokenization part is new. So easy search and intuitive. You can dig deeper. You can identify things. So they've taken that search and advanced it.
So then once I search for, let's say, a new surge protector, let's say, like I've designed a new surge protector. So then I look up surge protector on Loki instead of the USPTO, and then from there they show me what that's unique and different. What do they show me?
And you could take a look at what they're doing there. I would say surge protector would probably be too generic in what they're doing. So they used the example of a bike. What goes into the different portions of how a bicycle, there would be the handlebars, there's the gears, there's the pedals, there's all those things that have basically had to have been invented in some way.
Interesting. So it's visualizing for you the patents and what areas kind of they fit in, where which ones overlap in the different, and which ones are total outliers as well of all of them. That's cool. Nice.
So they're still working. I mean, a lot of these companies that have raised their funds, they're now building. There's the whole meme of hodling, and now there's the meme of, okay, once you've raised your money, you got to buildle or whatever. They're reversing the L and the D there.
It's really important to do that and to never forget to actually execute, actually build, don't just hold.
Another really one that I love to discuss specifically is Lightstar.
Yeah, our friends.
Martin. They're building kind of a tech layer for the mental health industry, and tokenizing and gamifying mental health practices and I would say meditative and modules that are going to go into helping you do your therapies. They're going to integrate that with the upcoming MDMA and psilocybin and ketamine psychotherapy centers that will be legalized, and I think in California, ketamine is already legalized, and MDMA, MAPS has raised all of their money for their phase 3 trials of MDMA, so psychotherapy, which is curing PTSD.
Yes.
Ketamine? Is that special K?
Yeah.
And that's legal?
They're using it in a very controlled clinical environment, and it's curing depression, severe depression. You give them a dose. All the other treatments haven't worked. You give them the doses, and through psychotherapy, they can come out of they've shown that the severe depression goes away afterwards.
I'm depressed.
And the MDMA one specifically set 70% cure rate of PTSD, no symptoms after 3 sessions. How many millions or billions of dollars do we spend on depression and anxiety and those types of things? So I'm really excited for
3 sessions. 70% cure rate.
Yep. A lot of the veterans, ibogaine treatments, curing opioid addictions with ibogaine treatments. That's going to be a really big thing this year as well. Using these banned, essentially, medicines for 30, 40 years, I kind of call it the psychedelic renaissance that's going on, because we haven't been able to really study the effects, and we're finding out that these are really amazing tools for
I love it.
For the brain and for people. I know it's very popular in the Bay Area, specifically in Silicon Valley, for like the microdosing of different types of those chemicals, as like a super creative cup of coffee kind of thing, right? People talk about that, and Tim Ferriss talked about it a lot as well. And then I guess there's one other one that we kind of talked about beforehand that we can discuss. That's a really cool concept. Was securency. The securency I've been working with for over a year. The guy that invented it, Dan Doney, he was working for the NSA at one point and helped build some of the foundations of the technology for Watson, for IBM. Was a MIT nuclear engineer, Navy nuke, was the first chief innovation officer of the Defense Intelligence Agency, so like looking at all these crazy technologies, and now he wants to decentralize the world, so he's on our side, right? And so he's built this new, and he saw that a lot of these tokens are going to be securities. They're going to be, these are securities. And so he's built a platform that allows you to liquidity enhance different types of illiquid assets. So if you took like a revenue stream.
So my token would be illiquid.
Well, not necessarily your token would be illiquid, but let's say you had a commercial real estate lease. and you get payments every month for the lease.
And I've done a couple of years of it.
And that's a liquid asset. You can't have liquidity. You don't necessarily can't take that and say, I want to sell off
this much money,
this much money, or it would cost a lot of money to liquidate that. They've created a regulation technology platform that does the KYC and AML for you to make sure that, and then in the back end allows you to basically tokenize something that usually and liquidize something that usually would not be liquid. So using for microfinance, giving people loans in places that they've never had it. They always use the example of in like Pakistan, where the in terms of an impact thing, in Pakistan, where there's these farmers and they have these loan shark, intergenerational loan sharks that kind of give them the money for their seed crops. You can finally give them some real capital that's not 100% interest and will attack your family or something like that if you don't pay, or your father's debts are your debts somehow. And that's one of the ones that he uses with Recall. And so they're building a really, really interesting platform for securities. The one
liquidity for illiquid markets. I like that.
One of the things that they're partnering with is the London Football Exchange. They're going to be able to tokenize. You're going to be able to own part of your football team. Which is really interesting. The fans can own part of the stadium or part of the team.
That was like the Green Bay Packers. Like that.
Exactly. And they're just doing this on kind of a international market with blockchains. So.
That's cool. So this is, what is this, like 16? How many total companies now are part of this?
I think we have about 15, 16 clients currently that we're advising and helping to connect. So like on our webpage, it shows that we help with smart contracts and strategic partnerships and capital raising and we don't necessarily do all of those things ourselves, but we have really trusted partners that can kind of go through the process and say, hey, they're really good at this portion, this is really good at this portion, and it's kind of like making a movie in these tokenized economies. When we all kind of work together and then the token sale launches and the economy launches, we all win. We all have created something that hopefully is creating enough value and disintermediating, old ways of doing commerce that we've helped create this, and we all kind of own a portion of it. I found that the less that you own, if you try to like own a lot of it, the network doesn't work. You got to give it away. You got to make sure that a lot of people are invested into the network to make it work. And so you want to incentivize lots of people to help with your token sale and your economy.
This is about 16 orgs are now using the blockchain consultancy. So I feel like this is a market that's going to go a couple, well, maybe an order of magnitude up in just the next year or so. Blockchain consultancies. So, because I don't think anybody was thinking of that. Not anybody, but very few people were thinking of that, even just a couple years ago. And this is good. Now we have an incredible list of these clients that you're serving, and they're serving the world with their technologies. I'm finding a lot of the examples that you listed to be really interesting. Let's talk about some of what's going on right now in. Let's ask about this first, and then we'll kind of venture down. So
the rabbit hole.
The rabbit hole. So we have tons and tons of different ICOs and just cryptocurrencies that exist in general right now that are out there. And this kind of reminds me of when currency first birthed into the world, where people were exchanging whatever unit of value they wanted for whatever goods. And then there birthed, so many different types of currencies, and then your currency doesn't work here in this part of the world, etc. And then now it seems to be pretty ubiquitous. It's just one currency per country, pretty much, is kind of the sort of there's only a couple hundred currencies in the world. Do you think that we're going to go from the massive 1 million different types of currencies down to only a couple dozen of the currencies in terms of what we exchange for value. Of course, there will always still be all the other ones that are specialized tokens for their one thing that they're doing.
Yeah, so let's unpack that a little bit. Currencies, have evolved over thousands and thousands of years. There's been different attributes that have really defined better mediums of exchange versus worse. You want to have durability, you want to have portability, you want to have divisibility for those types of currencies. So, grains of salt would be great, or pieces of gold. Land is not exactly portable, but you can divide it. And Aristotle kind of divided things. Fungibility, 1 ounce of gold is always worth 1 ounce of gold. 1 Bitcoin is always 1 Bitcoin. $1 is always $1. And so those are important factors. With the internet of money, and this is what cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and Ethereum and all things, I think that has kind of unleashed. How many blogs do we have? How many websites do we have? And so if we have a protocol for value exchange on the internet, and anyone can create a community currency and make it liquid with the rest of the world, and I can have my community currency over here that normally would only be good in this one geographical area, but now using something like Bancor, which is a platform that you can create your own digital currency, community currency, and then you can always make it liquid with everything else, and a lot of the internet of blockchains. I think that we'll see thousands, millions of different types of currencies and exchange of value. And I think that one of the main things that's happening is we're going to see what humans value change, and how we determine value change, because we're seeing a lot of loss of jobs, of automation and robotics and artificial intelligence. And so how do we value humans' worth if it's not their ability to, say, data entry, or to, serve you at some assembly line? If those things are automated, how do we ensure that humans can still create value for what we're doing? And so I think that with these types of different cryptocurrencies and tokens and all the different kind of new vocabulary that we're using to describe this system, some of which works and some of it's still kind of pulling this legacy language and trying to use it in this new system, I think we can incentivize what we want to value in the different systems that we create, and that's going to be really important. We don't necessarily have the right incentive structures on all of our systems in society currently.
How would I take an Allen token and give it to, or how a simulation token and a Decentranet token? How would they play?
I mean, so we need Decentranet tokens, so we don't have any tokens.
Correct. Just a hypothetical.
But if you were going to create it, there would be some sort of exchange rate to some sort of base level protocol like Ethereum or EOS or whatever. And if they were going to be exchanged for each other, ultimately they go back down to the base
Ethereum
thing and then go back out. And the value of the exchange rate would be the sum of the supply and the demand of the token and whatever monetary policy that was created. And if the Decentranet token in particular was solving some really big problem, and a lot of people needed to use it for that ecosystem, then there would be more demand versus if depending on what the simulation did. So they might have different values, but ultimately it's going to be the supply and demand of the tokens.
So ultimately, I have my digital wallet, and then my digital wallet has a base Ethereum, and then at any point I can go and get other tokens or get other goods or values or services with my base level currency getting their tokens or their services.
If it's liquid, if you're using something like Bancor, some of these tokens that exist now, they're not being listed on exchanges very easily, and so they're not liquid. Or if they are listed on an exchange, there's not a lot of the tokens on there. So if you owned 100,000 of the tokens and there's only 200,000 being listed on the exchange, you're going to massively, drastically change the price by selling it.
That's true.
And do that. Yeah. So liquidity is king in this thing, and so creating systems that can ensure that you have liquidity when you want to sell is really important.
Okay, all right. I think that is a pretty decent foray into that realm of conversation, and it's more difficult. It's going to take us a while to unpack it. So let's go on to the 99 to 1, because I think that's very relatable to what we were just talking about. It does seem as though there are more and more people that figure out how to be the black sheep when they see the 99 sheep moving one way. What is the black sheep doing moving the other way that could potentially be right, that the other white sheep are not figuring out to be right? And is there one of those black sheeps in the cryptocurrency and blockchain market?
So we'll unpack this. I want to make sure that I have the right concept. So the one sheep going is the one that kind of sees what's going on and is right and ends up making money on it when everyone else goes, oh my God, he's right. Is that what you're talking
maybe
about?
It's like, maybe a good example would be there's these 99 sheep that are all trying to, start ICOs and get a decentralization and blockchains. And then there's one person that is observing that and thinking like, what is going to happen there that is not being expected, that is not being thought about, and how can I help address that thing? So there's that aspect of looking at it. There's also the aspect of the so many different coins exist versus the foundation of just Bitcoin and Ethereum being these two that are going to live on forever versus.
So a lot of these tokens are created on top of Ethereum or on top of Bitcoin or on top of Neo or all these other types of systems. So ultimately, they're based on top of those. So Ethereum may live on forever, Bitcoin may live on forever, but I think that those third generation kind of blockchains improving. If we're at the Netscape level, there's going to be a lot of other applications that and protocols that are built out that and matured there. I think that the ones that actually build and execute and create economies and actually have solved a problem will be the ones that continue to go on. But I think that probably 90% of tokens will probably go to zero. At least 90% of startups fail, right? 9 out of 10. And so these are highly speculative and risky endeavors. They just happen to be really capitalized, right? Usually you don't get $5 to $10 million to try to start your startup, right? With a white paper. And a website. So they're highly capitalized. They may go on for a little while, but as time goes on, I think that most of these type tokens that someone has launched from their basement that maybe has put a team together will go to zero because they haven't necessarily thought out all of the different problems and aren't necessarily disintermediating some metric and won't necessarily be used. That's just my opinion, but we'll see. Yeah.
What do you think about the startup societies that are starting to blossom now around the world? I really want to pull up that graphic now because it's just too funny. We've got to pull it up.
I'm wearing actually the last. It's one of the shirts that I've been wearing a lot. It's the Startup Societies Foundation D10E, the last event that I did for D10E in August. It says tokenize this, but and there are a lot of movements to create intentional communities around the world. Puerto Rico being one of them, and lots of in Central and South America. There's people that are creating kind of an intentional community with like decentralized energy grids. They want to create their own kind of governance protocols on top of blockchain, and there's a lot of people that, as you can see, have kind of chosen to decentralize their life. When someone sent me this, like when it came out, like 10 people sent it to me, and we're like, they memed you.
They memed you. They did. They memed you. That is you right there.
That's me.
Yeah.
I gotta get my headphones and a robe on. But
so these startup societies in different beautiful places in the world, but also in places in the world that really need the attention of sustainability and energy and resources and time. But the general gist of it is that there, for example, like Tulum in Mexico is one of these places. It's a very beautiful beach resort on the Caribbean. There's some Mayan ruins. There's all this cool stuff there, and it's still very, it's not urbanized yet. And so a lot of people go there, and the general gist is, this is the guy that's like, I've been called to decentralize my lifestyle and trust the divine feminine. In you honors my high vibration and resonance for open relationships. Now, where's the cuddle puddle? Where's the cuddle puddle, right? And these guys, Palo Santo, microdosing, mala beads,
crystal. And it says former tech bro turned enlightened nomadic shamanic DJ life coach entrepreneur and alchemist. And I think they
she's sitting here going, you don't need another ayahuasca ceremony, you need to leave Tulum.
And so this has become a pretty famous kind of meme, and they've actually changed a lot of there's one for a female one, and they've changed a lot of the stuff in different versions of it. But yeah, they're exemplifying that there's a lot of people that have kind of started running around the world, have taken to a very spiritual place, have done a lot of these different types of plant medicines, have become a nomadic person because they decided they wanted to travel in their late 20s, early 30s, and there's a lot of people out there like that, and I think it's going to continue. The more people that are able to travel and go around the world and use these new decentralized remote technologies to do work, but it's definitely a great meme for
it's a perfect
the people that have done it and have created that. So
we'll see where these form, because Peter Thiel talks a lot about when is this network effect starting to actually not be worth it, as in, is it worth the $4,000 a month to live in the one bedroom in San Francisco? I actually think it is. I'm contrarian in that sense. I think the network effect is absolutely crazy. I think it's totally worth every penny to grind and hustle to. You can find a bedroom inside of a house of like 5 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms for only $1,000 or $1,300 or something a month. So it's not as obscene as it's being made out to be in many cases. But I think it's worth every single penny for the network effect in the area. And then the next question is, when is it going to be that so many people that are part of this network effect of these tech bros turned shamanistic lovers of reality and everything, when is that going to move to other hubs like freaking Omaha, Nebraska, and when is that going to move to like all these border cities by Mexico, or when is that going to move to Tulum, and when is that going to move to other parts of the world? And will the network effect keep up? As in, when Tulum becomes urbanized, first of all, will it become urbanized?
I hope not. I like Tulum as it is in terms of it's a very kind of, I would say it's a very environmentally conscious place. If you tried to urbanize it like Cancun, I think it would ruin its kind of feel, especially with all the like Mayan ruins and all that kind of stuff there. I don't know. I would just say that there are lots of like WeWork and Selena's and different types of companies that are preparing for the remote worker, and that more and more people, if they can choose to travel for a couple of years, will. I do think that in San Francisco that there is a massive network effect, and there's a benefit of being here, especially for a specific type of startup. And whenever I'm here, it's hard for me to leave because there's so much going on, and there's so many interesting people that you run into just at events. And so there will be always concentrations of innovation in different hubs, but I do see that spreading out, and I do see service providers, like I said, we live, making facilities for these digital nomads that can do all of their work from a laptop wherever they are in the world. And as these sustainability, like I really want to see these sustainable communities build that. As long as they have internet and a nice place to stay, you can be on a beach and be working things. So Tulum, as long as they do it sustainably and they don't really damage the ecosystem there. There's a lot of national parks and cenotes.
Those are gorgeous.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to urbanize that and destroy that with a lot of.
All of a sudden, the ecosystems will change once there's more and more alcohols and chemicals and all these other kinds of things that are spilled over into those areas. The ecosystems will change, and then biodiversity will change, and then also will potentially pollute it with plastics because we're not fully transitioned to biodegradables. Although we did just post a video about these really cool plates that are being made over in India, where they're stamping together leaves.
Interesting.
And they're sewing together these leaves, which they've been eating off leaves for a long time, but each plate is less than $1, biodegrades in under 4 weeks, which is super impressive. We've been really trying to push for that movement, but the problem is that everybody wants to increase their fucking bottom line. And if you're gonna use a paper plate that is throwaway, or a plastic plate or styrofoam plate that is gonna cost you 1 penny, it's gonna take 50 years to degrade, and it's gonna pollute the shit out of ecosystems. But if you use a $1 plate and you fork over that other part of your bottom line, it will be better for the ecosystem. So how can we figure out where to charge people a little bit more or whatever in order to do that? So I'm glad that brought us there. I'm glad that we looped together the startup societies, because I feel like we need to go, when we do it, and do it responsibly in a way that mixes together the ecology with the business in a sustainable way. And I think that we are this enlightened, nomadic, shamanic, tribal people that go over there and do it that way. I hope so.
Well, engaging with the local community people is the most important thing. Even just going to a place, if there's a ton of people that go there, it's seen as something like taking over versus helping to build their community in a sustainable way. So that we want to make sure that happens. But
exactly.
Building sustainable systems with the technology from the ground up with these communities is really important. And as far as like the paper plates and styrofoam plates, figuring out ways to incentivize people to purchase the right things is the way to do it. And I think that cryptocurrencies will eventually create incentive systems to do that, either by paying people more money to incentivize them to do it, maybe with some sort of token that rewards you for using the sustainable one, or by tracking how many of these other companies are producing and maybe charging more for the environmental, because that's a negative externality that we don't see in our price, right? We don't see, if you're using a styrofoam plate, you're not seeing the damage that it does to the ocean, or the plastics you're using. You're not seeing the damage that it would cost to take it. To clean it up.
So let's do a little dive into crypto psychedelics as well. So you hosted your first annual event. And that was, where was it, when was it, and what did you guys talk about there? And are you guys all just microdosing and talking about crypto?
No. I think it's way more academic than that. And so the origin of this was that we did a fundraiser cruise for MAPS in August, called the Crypto Psychedelic Cruise, and we had some different visionary artists on board, and we threw a fundraising event to raise money for MDMA phase 3 trials of MDMA psychotherapy. From that, I connected with the guys from Symposia, which is a psychedelic advocacy website, and I wanted to throw an event down in Tulum. I'd been hearing about Tulum. I wanted to go to Tulum to see what it was like. And so on February 3rd, we threw the first ever initial event offering, is what we called it, IEO of Crypto Psychedelic. CryptoPsychedelic.com is the website.
Yep.
And really, we flew down some of the world's most renowned academic researchers and scientists, Dennis McKenna, Catherine McLean. There were some people from MAPS, Natalie Ginsburg was there, that have been really studying all of the science that's been going on and doing the science through the traditional means. We also then invited a lot of the cryptocurrency community to come down and talk about what this new technology is, how it works. A lot of people had made, obviously, a lot of money, and so donating to MAPS was something that we really wanted people to do. MAPS did raise all of the money through the Pineapple Fund and the other donations. Pineapple Fund donated, I think ended up donating a total of $5 million to MAPS.
That's amazing.
And so it was really a collaboration of these people that had been researching and studying these tools that we have, these medicines that have been banned, and this new form of money and incentive systems and governance systems to see how we can do not only fund the science more efficiently, because sometimes it's really hard to get the money through traditional means to fund it, as well as maybe fund and create advocacy systems, incentive systems for communities to treat these new medicines as and get away from the people think of them as like, oh, we can't touch them, they're psychedelic, they're illegal, and they are illegal, like possessing them and all that stuff, legal in the United States. In Tulum and a lot of other places, plant medicine ceremonies are legal. But wouldn't it be nice if we could figure out a way of doing a massive advocacy campaign through cryptocurrencies to end the drug war, right? The drug war is a massive $1 trillion fail. It doesn't actually solve any of our problems. People have been killed, thrown in massive amounts with the highest prison concentration in the United States in terms of throwing them in jail for having a piece of plant in their pocket, right? Wouldn't it be really interesting if we can figure out a cryptocurrency advocacy organization that educates people about what these types of things are and how do we reverse those perverse incentives that the drug war has been basically pushing on us for 40, 50 years, and the false narrative that's been created around these substances.
This sounds like my kind of event. You doing it again next year?
Yeah, we are. We're doing probably a couple more in the next 6 months. There's a Beyond Psychedelics conference in Prague in June, and so we might have a small event after that discussing thing. We'll get back to you on the date.
Nice. I love the idea, though. It does seem like there is a little bit of the microdosing and discussing crypto, though. But
I mean,
it is
definitely
academic
people
in purpose.
can take whatever substances they choose to take. But I mean, it was an all-day event. We had sort of panels and talks by some of the most renowned psychedelic scientists in the world. We had panels on crypto, and then we kind of put them together and said, okay, how do we create these incentives? There was a party and a DJ afterwards, and we had a great time.
All of a sudden, networks are morphing.
We watched the sunrise on the beach. It was great.
That's great.
And we put those types of people together.
Now they're going to go and work together.
And it was just a really cool brand. We didn't do really any marketing for it, but I come back to the Bay Area and I'm just like, oh yeah, well we did Crypto Psychedelic. They're like, you did Crypto Psychedelic? We heard about that. And I was like, that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah, this sounds great. I'm really happy that those two fields are coming together. That's what I told you the first time that you taught me about it in December. I was really pumped about it. So, okay, and then let's maybe chime about this. God, that's going to be so impactful, those two coming together, psychedelics and crypto. How about the general data and privacy rights? Let's talk about that quick. It's hard to talk about quick, but just in general, it seems as though decentralization is causing these horizontal marketplaces now of data, more and more open source data sets, more and more machine learning and AI is able to make more accurate insights into people's lives because there's larger data sets, and then you're able to give your own access control to the data, so that way you can choose when you want to give data, how much exactly you want to give. Where do you think that this is going to mesh together with what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Brittany Kaiser, who's the whistleblower from Cambridge Analytica, who was working for them, has completely blown the whistle on all of the different privacy practices that Cambridge Analytica did with the election and with Facebook and Google, and has made this really one of her campaigns. She's a very good close friend of mine, so.
What about that other guy, Christopher?
Wiley, I've never met him.
Okay.
She worked with him, but I know her through the blockchain community.
She came first and then he came? That's how it worked?
I think that it was going on simultaneously. I think he was one of the people in the news first, but I think that there was the talk of being on the right side of history. All of our data is siloed into these very, very large organizations that really don't give us how they use the data. It's very non-transparent. It's very opaque in terms of how and why and when and how much money these companies are making off our data. And so the movement here is that there have been massive abuses of our data used with Cambridge Analytica. Specifically, there's psychometric profiles to influence elections, and we're not seeing exactly how these things. A lot of times, these companies know more about you than your significant other or your mother. Yeah, they know exactly what you're going to say and how you're going to do things based upon your consumer behavior and all of the data they're collecting on your devices.
Ron, the AI knows more about you than your mother. Than your mama's mama.
Simmer down.
And so one of the new tools out there, and there's a legal framework, there's a legal argument to say that our data is our property, and that we respect property in Western culture and in common law very much. And if our data is our property, we should be the ones benefiting off of the sale of the thing, not some third party. And we should know exactly how and when this data is being used.
And then the question becomes, but then how does the service make money giving you the product? Yeah.
And so I think that we're in a turning point here where these large companies, Google and Facebook, who are making billions of dollars off of our data, may have to change some of their business models and figure out a way of decentralizing and democratizing that data. And obviously blockchains are a tool to democratize the use of data, create data marketplaces. SingularityNet is one that's doing that for artificial intelligence. Yep. There's a lot of ones. So Data Wallet is one that's coming out that wants to allow you to own your data. And these ad networks aren't going to go away, but we have to figure out ways of controlling it. And so we're at the very, very beginnings, I think, of these actual applications coming out. I don't think it's going to be tomorrow that you're going to get some sort of token for all of your data. I don't think it's going to be in the next month. It might be in a year or two. It's going to move pretty quickly. But the largest thing that we can kind of say is that if data is our property, and that's the way we want to design these new rules and regulations about how we do this, the technology that's going to make it possible to treat that data that way is going to be blockchain technologies and decentralized data marketplaces. So hashtag own your data. There's a change.org petition going around right now where you can, they want to be able to make it a front and center point in the upcoming hearings and things in Washington, and so you can check out hashtag own your data and go check that out. Brian Johnson, also really interesting point, especially for this show. Brian Johnson is the founder of Kernel, and he wrote a Medium post, "Your data is your property," and he's talking about it from a perspective of, Kernel is the company that's going to make the brain computer interfaces, and that's what he's saying, if we're going to eventually hook our brains up to the internet and we're going to be able to have that bandwidth there, we must own our data. It must be ours. It can't just be everyone else's. Otherwise, these companies have a direct link to your brain and all of the data that comes out of it. So he's looking at it from the future perspective of, if you're ever going to hook it up into your brain to the internet, you must own everything.
It makes sense that with the neuroprosthetics or neurolaces, that from the brain there should be a barrier here, so that way the information can never take control of you through this way. It can only go from this way for control wise. That's a really good way to look at it, because you never want the control to come in from the from the outside in. So that's good. Okay, let's run you through a couple of the simulation questions before we end.
Okay.
What do you think about wealth inequality? How do we solve that?
I think that right now we're going through the largest shift in wealth redistribution on the planet. It may not look like it, but we're shifting from a very top-down, hierarchical, centralized monetary system and corporate system to the beginnings here of a decentralized ecosystem, open sourcing of money, open sourcing of governance rules, and not that the people at the top won't necessarily benefit from this, but it's about raising the bottom up and creating that universal basic income. So
that's a good way to put it. Most of the time we talk about how crazy the split is and how it is becoming, which it is, but at the same time I think the decentralization is causing it to pick up some steam. And
so I think we're going through the open sourcing of money, where everyone is going to be able to create different types of currency and different types of value systems, and that's going to be a massive wealth transfer to the poor and middle class. And through these types of systems, we can incentivize and ensure that those people are taken care of when this shift occurs, especially with the automation and artificial intelligence that takes away those normal jobs. So
awesome.
I do think it's a problem. But I do think that we have the tools now to help solve those problems.
Do you think we're alone in the cosmos?
Absolutely not. I think that the universe, it would be an awful waste of space to kind of quote Contact, or what it was. Was it Contact, or was it, they said it in the movie Contact, or was it, I forget who said it, but it would be an awful waste of space. Mm-hmm. I think that the traditional means of taking a rocket and pushing it to the next star isn't necessarily how the other entities in the universe would do it. Maybe there's a wormhole, maybe there's a quantum entanglement teleporter of some sort where you can do that. Maybe you can beam your consciousness somewhere else and you're there. I absolutely think that the universe is thriving with life and continues to evolve and will.
So you think advanced civilizations are roaming the cosmos?
Yeah, and whether that's kind of transparent in the, like we can see that in the kind of light spectrum that we're able to view and the electromagnetic radiation that we're able to detect, I don't know. I think that there's a lot in the universe we don't understand, but I definitely think that there's a lot of life teeming and entities of one form or another out there in this universe. At least I hope so.
Do you think this is base reality or simulation?
I think that this probably is some sort of weird simulation. I think more and more. I kind of. It's just getting too intense, and I'm like, the simulation,
very intense.
The simulation is breaking down, man. The Matrix is breaking down. That's what I like. It's mind blowing.
AI and automation and wealth inequality and all these things. It's
and CRISPR and blockchains. And I always say, like, if you haven't looked around, like if you haven't had your mind blown today, you haven't looked around long enough.
Yeah.
Right. You're just mind blowing every day, and I just think that we're. That the simulation, whatever this is that we're moving into, is, if it is a simulation, it's kind of getting to the exponential portion of it, right?
Yeah, we're about to hit the peak of the story, the climax of the story.
Yeah.
And it's will the species survive on this rock or not?
Or will we go through the great filter?
Or will we go through the great filter? Because at certain times it seems like we're about to hit that filter, and then who knows, maybe life will start back up in a couple million years, Who knows if there's some way for that to happen.
You never know.
All right, and then how about, what is the most beautiful thing in the world?
The most beautiful thing in the world? I think that human creative expression and connection is the most beautiful thing in the world. I think of it as like the largest display of human creative potential and expression is like Burning Man, where you're going and building a city in the middle of the desert that is purely built to express oneself to the fullest. But not just going there, bringing that out to the rest of the rest of the world in the default reality or whatever is a beautiful process. But fully human creative expression and creativity and art and connection is the most beautiful thing in the world.
I love that. And it's also beautiful that the cosmos produced us to do that.
Where the cosmos is expressing itself in that way.
In that way, yeah.
Allowing us to do that.
And then maybe we end with, what is something that you believe to be true that nobody else believes to be true?
I don't know that no one else believes.
Or even just maybe a couple
of things. I mean, I firmly believe that we are moving into the golden age of prosperity. A lot of people focus on the negatives of the world.
Yeah.
I believe that we're moving into a society that doesn't have these weird old geographical boundaries that kind of contain us, whether it be through currencies or governance systems. These are arbitrary geographical boundaries that we've drawn on maps because we couldn't conquer people more than that. I think are going away. And I think that leads to massive human prosperity. I'm an eternal optimist, always.
Yeah, me too.
And so I don't know that. See, someone else at least agrees with me.
I think we're well on our way to that place, but also we need to buckle in and figure out how exactly we're going to get there with more people.
Right, because the worst is yet to come before we get there. I just want to throw in my 2 cents there, young men. Thanks.
Fair enough.
We love you, Ron.
We do love you. That would be, and I think that we've potentially gone through some iterations in the past already that we haven't necessarily fully understand in our history, and that maybe we'll uncover that once we get some greater technological advancements and kind of unveil a lot of the control systems that have been put in place in towards to like kind of control the narrative.
Ooh, I'm excited to unveil those. Of what has been controlling the narrative. Let's unveil that over time. Let's decentralize everything. Let's see.
I agree.
Is there anything that shouldn't be decentralized?
I would say as many of the power and control systems that we have, we should decentralize. Our relationship, like companies and managing specific types of things can be, like we have people that have a small hierarchy to make decisions. I think it's really hard to make decisions in companies and in some systems without a clear hierarchy of control of who's doing what.
And that's kind of the political system as well, which is what we didn't get to chime too much in on, but
next time.
And that kind of relates with what you were just saying as well. So there should be some sort of a hierarchical system of decision making.
I think in private communities, there still should be rule sets that can be somewhat hierarchical, and you can always opt out. There's a voice and there's an exit within different types of things. You can always fork it. And so, but decentralize as many things as possible in terms of especially the control systems of how we operate with each other. Always give people the ability to create their own system from the ground up.
Awesome. Decentranet.com, Matt McKibbin.
Pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to see you.
Yeah, pleasure to hang out, pleasure to talk. This has been a blast. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you had a good time, like, comment, subscribe. Do check out Decentranet.com. Do check us out on Patreon. If there were some cool things said during this conversation, share it with other people. Get them inspired by the idea of decentralization. Go look up all of the cool examples that they're consulting with right now and think about all those impacting systems on the planet. Get pumped. We're going to be back at you again tomorrow. We're super excited with Allison Deutman. And stay sexy, stay smart, stay inspired. Thank you, Ron Vargas, our producer and director. Talk to you more soon. Peace.
Thank you, everybody.
Woo!